Jerusalem, a name that echoes through millennia, it stands as a city of profound significance, for countless generations a spiritual home, a focal point for faith and devotion. Here, ancient stories are etched in stone. The air itself seems to hum with history. A place chosen, set apart, held sacred, its destiny woven into the fabric of belief. A beacon, drawing hearts towards the divine. The temple once stood at its very heart, a magnificent structure, a testament to faith. It symbolized God's presence among his people. Within its courts, prayers ascended like incense. Sacrifices were offered, year after year. Pilgrims traveled from afar, their faces bright. They came seeking solace, seeking connection. The temple was the soul of Jerusalem. This city was tied to a solemn promise, a covenant made between God and his chosen. Their identity, their purpose was linked here. To this land, to these very stones. Jerusalem was not merely a place to live, it was a living symbol of that sacred bond. Its fortunes reflected the people's journey, their triumphs, their failings, their enduring hope. Then came the invaders, a storm of men. Their armies stretched across the horizon. Fear, a cold serpent, coiled around the city. The unthinkable was about to happen. Sentries watched from the ancient ramparts. Their warnings echoed through the anxious streets. The great gates were barred, the defenses manned, but a sense of dread began to seep in. This was an enemy of terrible power. The siege began, a slow, cruel tightening. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months. Food supplies dwindled, water grew scarce. Hope began to fray like an old rope. The relentless assault on the city walls, battering rams thundered, a constant dull roar. Stones rained down, chipping away at resolve. The defenders fought bravely with fierce desperation, but the enemy's numbers were overwhelming. The walls, once symbols of security, groaned. They had stood for generations, proud and strong. Now cracks appeared, like wounds on aged skin. Each breach sent a tremor of fear. The attackers pressed their advantage relentlessly. Their shouts mingled with the cries of the besieged. The sacred ground was soon to be trodden. The invaders poured into the holy city. Like a raging flood, they swept through its streets. They showed no mercy, no restraint in their actions. The sacred places were now in their grasp. Psalm 79 tells this grim story. O God, the nations have come into your inheritance. They have defiled your holy temple. These words paint a picture of utter violation, a deep wound inflicted on the people's soul. The temple, that heart of their spiritual life. It became a target for the enemy's rage. Its beautiful gates were smashed and burned. Its sacred courtyards were overrun by soldiers. They mocked the rituals, scorned the beliefs. The holy vessels once used in worship were plundered, taken as spoils of war. The inner sanctuary, the holiest place, was exposed, its sanctity brutally shattered. The invaders treated the city with contempt. They laid Jerusalem in heaps of rubble. Houses were looted and then set ablaze. The carefully built structures became ruins. The streets, once filled with life and prayer, now echoed with the sounds of destruction. The dust began to settle. A grim silence fell. Jerusalem was no longer a vibrant city. It was a landscape of devastation, of loss. Heaps of stone marked where homes once stood. The smell of smoke hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the recent horrors. The once proud walls were now just jagged outlines, breached and broken, offering no protection. The city was a ghost of its former self. The human cost was almost beyond imagining. They have given the bodies of your servants as food for the birds of the heavens. This stark imagery reveals a terrible truth. The dead lay unburied in the open, their flesh given to the beasts of the earth. There was no dignity left, even in death. This profound disrespect amplified the sorrow. The survivors witnessed unspeakable sights. Blood had flowed like water around Jerusalem, so many lives extinguished in the violence, and there was no one left to bury them. The living were too few, too weak, too broken. This detail paints a picture of utter desolation. A community shattered, its social fabric torn. The basic rituals of mourning were impossible. Amidst this desolation, a voice rises. It is the voice of the psalmist, Asaph. His words are a raw, unfiltered expression of pain. He speaks for all who have suffered. His heart is a vessel overflowing with grief. He does not shy away from the horror. He lays bare the wounds of his people. His cry is directed towards the heavens, a desperate plea for God to see. He describes the scene with brutal honesty. The bodies of God's servants unceremoniously left, a feast for the scavengers of the air. The flesh of the faithful torn by wild animals. These images are shocking, intended to move, to convey the depth of their degradation. The psalmist wants God to understand the full extent of their suffering. The enemies have shown no shred of humanity. The blood of the slain, a gruesome river. It stained the very ground of the holy city. The lack of proper burial was a final insult, a sign of complete societal breakdown. The psalmist paints this picture for a reason. He is building a case before the divine judge. Look, he says, look at what has become of us. See the cruelty we have endured. The suffering did not end with the destruction. There was another layer of pain to endure. The survivors became an object of scorn. We have become a reproach to our neighbors. Psalm 79:4. Those who lived in the surrounding lands, they looked upon the defeated with contempt. The fall of Jerusalem was a spectacle, and its people were now pariahs. Their God, it seemed, had failed them. They were mocked and derided by all around them. Psalm 79:4. The taunts of the victors and even onlookers, they cut deeper than any physical wound. Their faith was openly questioned, ridiculed. Where is their God now, the enemies sneered. This mockery was a heavy burden to bear. It added a profound shame to their grief. Their unique status as God's chosen people seemed like a bitter joke in these dire times. The humiliation was a public spectacle. The nations saw Jerusalem's weakness, its fall. They saw the temple desecrated, the people scattered. This was not just a military defeat, it was perceived as a spiritual one too. The God of Israel appeared powerless, unable to protect his own city, his own people. This perception fueled the scorn of their enemies. How long, O Lord? The psalmist turns his gaze directly to God. His words are filled with a desperate urgency. How long, Lord? Will you be angry forever? This is the cry of a heart at its breaking point. The suffering feels endless, overwhelming. God's anger, it seems, has no limits. It has consumed them, brought them to ruin. The question hangs heavy in the desolate air, a plea for an answer, for some respite. How long will your jealousy burn like fire? The psalmist uses this powerful image. Fire consumes, it destroys, it leaves only ash. This is how God's anger feels to them, a relentless, all-consuming force. It has burned away their city, their hope. The sense of divine abandonment is profound. They feel as if they are utterly alone, forsaken by the one they trusted most. This question, how long, is a common refrain. In times of deep suffering it rises naturally. It speaks of endurance stretched to its limit, of a pain that has become unbearable. The people have waited, they have endured, but there seems to be no end in sight. The silence from heaven is deafening. The psalmist's tone begins to shift subtly, from anguished questioning to a demand for action. He calls for divine justice to be unleashed, not upon his own people, but upon their enemies. Pour out your wrath on the nations, he cries, on the nations that do not acknowledge you. These are the ones who have caused such devastation, those who have acted with such brutal cruelty. Let them now feel the weight of divine displeasure on the kingdoms that do not call on your name. This plea is specific, targeted. It is directed at those who defy God, those who have shown no respect for sacred things. The reason for this call for vengeance is clear. For they have devoured Jacob, the psalmist states, and laid waste his dwelling place. The enemies have consumed God's people. They have destroyed God's chosen city. This is not simply a cry for revenge, though the raw human desire for it is present. It is also a plea for cosmic balance, for wrongs to be righted, for justice to prevail. The atrocities committed cannot go unanswered. If they do, it might seem that evil triumphs, that there is no ultimate accountability. Then, a remarkable turn, a moment of introspection. The psalmist looks inward, towards his own people. He acknowledges their own part, their own failings. Do not hold against us the sins of past generations. This is a humble admission, a recognition, that perhaps their suffering is not entirely unearned. There is a history, a legacy of disobedience, a pattern of straying from the covenant. This honesty is crucial, a path to healing. This acknowledgement of sin is not self-flagellation, it is a mature understanding of cause and effect. Within their theological worldview, sin has consequences, and the destruction of Jerusalem could be seen as a severe but perhaps just divine discipline. Yet even as he admits this, the plea is urgent. May your mercy come quickly to meet us. The need for compassion outweighs everything else. They are at their lowest point, desperate. For we are in desperate need, the psalmist continues. They have been brought very low, crushed by circumstance. Their strength is gone, their resources depleted. They have nothing left to rely on, except the possibility of God's unmerited favor. This confession of utter helplessness is powerful. It is in this place of complete vulnerability that the cry for mercy becomes most potent. The psalm does not end in despair. A glimmer of hope begins to shine through. The psalmist looks towards a future, however distant, where God's honor will be restored. Why should the nations say, "Where is their God?" This question, once a taunt, fuels a desire for God to act decisively. Before our eyes, make known to the nations your vengeance for the blood of your servants. He envisions God hearing the groans of the prisoners, those still captive, those condemned to die. He trusts in God's great power to preserve them. There is also a fierce desire for retribution. Pay back into the laps of our neighbors 7 times the scorn they have hurled at you, Lord. This is the raw emotion of a deeply wounded people, yet it is tempered by the ultimate focus. The scorn was directed at God himself. And then, the final beautiful affirmation of faith, a promise of renewed relationship and worship. Then we, your people, the sheep of your pasture, will praise you forever. This image of God as a shepherd is tender. It speaks of care, guidance, and protection. Despite all they have endured, they still see themselves as God's flock, under his ultimate care. This is a profound statement of enduring trust.